consider these days, and however you are doing to take care of yourself during these times. Um, you know, sending you lots of hugs and love from this side. So thinking of all of you guys, many of you are my friends, so definitely thinking about you. Um, so as Alexa said, welcome to the, what is it, the third meeting now of the council. And we have an agenda, where we're conducting business and we have some reports. We're going to have Adam from the budget office be presenting us kind of the process of how the budget is set up. And I think with the idea of getting us all on the same page on understanding how the budgets are put together, how we influence it, how we can comment on it, and then the role that this body has in helping advise or provide recommendations along that. So I think we thought it was important to, because it is budget season, and we've received many, many questions from you around the budget. We thought it was appropriate to start with that, or do that presentation that Adam's going to do today. But before doing that, and before turning it over to Council Member Taylor, who's also going to be on the call to provide some other framing comments around the budget, I did really just wanted to pause and just recognize a few things. One, give you the update that, as you know, one of the co-chairs of this committee was James Head, the CEO of the East Bay Community Foundation. He let us know today that for many conflicts that he has, he's not going to be able to continue as the co-chair. So we wanted you to know about this change. We're going to definitely miss his voice and his calming leadership quality that he brought to this group. But also mention it because we very well recognize that from the leadership co-chair team, he was the only Black voice on this committee. And we just want to give you our commitment that we are going to make sure that our Black voice is represented at the co-chair and leadership level. So we want to make sure that you understood, one, understood the change, but also that we're committed to making sure that we replace it with someone that represents our Black community. Very intentionally just giving our times, and just wanted to be very candid and upfront about that. The other thing is just, taking a pause right now, and just the moment that we're in right now just underscores the urgency of doing something, and the urgency that this group has of taking an opportunity to provide input and advice to a city that fully understands that the governments and systems that were set up have not benefited everybody equally. So it just really underscores that as we move in this process, the issues around race, equity, and shaping the future as an equitable economic development, and giving that equitable economic development lens is critically important. So I don't think I need to convince any of you of the importance of that. We just wanted to make sure that we just pause and acknowledge the discussion that's going on in our communities right now. I also wanted to mention that, for me personally, this is about, I agreed to be on this advisory council for a couple of reasons, but most importantly, because I thought that we could all get something done. And that's still my hope. And I wanted to make sure that today, and we included that in the agenda, that we actually spend less time presenting to you, and we actually spent more time listening to you. We will have that budget presentation, as you know, but for the working group report outs, they're going to be very quick, but we really wanted to open up to this group because at least for the first two sessions, you've heard a lot from us. And you've heard a lot of report outs, and you've heard a lot of presentations, and a lot of talking heads talking to you. And we want to make sure that you understand that we want to hear from you too. So Marissa and I and Micah are going to facilitate a discussion just around, what's going on with you. I know there's working group meetings happening, and there's work being done. But beyond that, we definitely wanted to, in a way, kind of just shut up and listen. And I think that's important. And I think that's important that we hear your voice as well. I think there are things that are moving in the working group. The different phases are putting together different proposals and recommendations, and we'll hear some of them today, and feel free to everybody else to expand. But we really want to make sure that you know, for the listening session, we want to make sure that you know that this is valuable time for you. You know, we recognize that. So we want to enact meaningful change in the city of Oakland, but this starts with your time, and we want to make sure that we hear from you whether this is working and how it's working. And if you have ideas, we want to hear them. Not all ideas start and end with us. The best ideas start when we have a collective forum for you to contribute your ideas. So we want to make sure that you speak up and that you share your thoughts. And then just finally, I just wanted to say that, you know, everybody from Alexa to Marissa and Micah and everybody else involved in you know, the people that are facilitating the working groups, are we going to get everything absolutely right? Likely not. And I think that's okay. You know, I've throughout my life, I've been okay with uncertainty. I've been okay with doing missteps, but only if we recognize our missteps. But what I really want from all of you, and what we want from all of you, is just your very candor thinking. And we want to make sure that you share your thoughts and you feel like your voice is heard. One of the key values setting up to this council was we want to make sure that the community is heard, and you are part of that community. So we want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. So I did just wanted to provide those framing comments around how we're just thinking about this moment, the urgency of this moment of doing something, and getting to work, rolling up our sleeves. I think we're all doing this because we care about the city of Oakland. You know, you could be running your business, you could be doing other things with your time right now, but you choose to be with us. So we want to make sure that your time is used wisely here. So with that, I really wanted to turn it over to Council Member Lauren Taylor from District 6, who joined us today to provide some framing comments about the budget, so we can all get squared away around what the budget is. I mean, we all know what it is, but you know, because what the process the city takes to prepare this budget and how you can contribute. So I wanted to turn it over to Councilmember Taylor, wherever he is in the Zoom.
Thanks, Jose. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. So apologies, my video is not working. It's frozen here, but I am grateful for the opportunity to provide some framing remarks. Grateful for the amazing team with the city who is helping us navigate this budget process that we're in the middle of. I'm sure those on the line have heard or know that we are in a challenging situation for the city where our revenues have been reduced drastically, just like many of your businesses experience. So we're trying to figure out how we navigate in the midst of a 2-year budget cycle to true up and figure out exactly what we're working with, how we can project something that we have confidence for in the future, and make sure that our resources are being prioritized in the best way to not only bridge the current gap, but set ourselves up to rebound in a way that looks out for all Oaklanders, and specifically those who are most, I guess, vulnerable. And so as we navigate this process, I think it's important for transparency for everyone to know where we are and know what the opportunities are to provide input, thoughts, perspectives, because my role, that of the other council members and the City of Oakland staff, is really to be stewards of the public's resources the best way possible. So we are at a point where we have received a budget proposal in terms of how we adjust our plans based on realities moving forward for the next year, the remaining half of our 2-year budget cycle. And so our finance department, led by Director Adam Benson, who is going to provide a more detailed overview, they've brought that forward. We on the council are taking that as a baseline and exploring what sort of tweaks, adds, enhancements make sense based on our connection and our knowledge of what's happening on the ground with our constituents that we represent, that we are deeply connected to on a regular basis. And our target is that by the end of June, we will align as a body on what the appropriate sort of budget revisions are for this upcoming fiscal year 2020 to 2021. So I'm sure you've heard headlines. There's a lot of advocacy, a lot of angst and concern that we make the right decisions, that we are prioritizing those right investments, that we are, when we are making reductions, that we do that in a way that responds to those who sort of need the most support, those essential services, while also not risking the future of our city as we move forward. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions after Adam gives his presentation, but just want to show appreciation to him, the finance team, the rest of the department staffs for really doing an incredible job presenting this first pass that we on the council are now wrestling with in partnership with our constituents, our residents, and all the advocates that are out.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Councilmember Taylor. This is Adam Benson. I really appreciate that introduction and all of the support that you give to me and my team. This is absolutely a team effort. No other way to say it. I will be very brief. I want to thank you all and thank Alexa for inviting me to speak to you today. I do not have any prepared PowerPoints to share with you. As you imagine, my staff has been incredibly busy working through a number of council member requests, but also our own individual budget amendments and analyses. And so I would just refer you to our website, which is oaklandca.gov/budget. Again, that's oaklandca.gov/budget. And you can access all of the various documents, PowerPoint, staff reports, and specific amendments, as well as answers to various questions from community groups and council members. It's all posted on that website. So at a very high level, the budget process really begins early in the fall under normal years, where we start to develop our baseline expectations for both revenues and expenditures. This year, certainly a little bit different, with the COVID pandemic striking sometime in early March. That really resulted in a complete overhaul of our budget assumptions on revenues, both for the current fiscal year 1920, which is wrapping up here in the next couple of weeks, but also for our assumptions for next year, for fiscal year 2021, which is obviously the main subject of discussion today. Not surprisingly, the key tax categories that we see being impacted are our transient occupancy taxes, hotel taxes, our sales taxes, parking taxes, and other parking related revenues. So we do have a parking tax on all off-street parking in the city, but we also get revenues related to parking through fines and penalties, at on-street parking meters, and also at our city-owned parking garages. We are still monitoring the impact on other key tax categories, including property taxes. Property taxes tend to lag economic decline as lower assessed valuations move through the roll. We're still determining whether or not we need to anticipate further decline in property taxes over not just next fiscal year, but the following one as well, which would really be accounted for in our next biennial budget. And we're also looking at real estate transfer tax. As you all probably know, we do charge a tax on the transfer of real estate in Oakland. And in the last several years, that revenue category has grown substantially. It is a very volatile revenue source. Even in good economic times, a lot of the resources that we bring in are dependent upon one or two large property transfers that, if don't happen, we can see significant changes to our underlying assumptions. So while we're seeing major declines in our consumer-driven taxes, we are anticipating to see some lingering effects of the economic malaise as it permeates through the rest of the budget. I will say this is unprecedented in many ways. I've been doing this for a while now, and I've never really had to rebuild a budget from scratch in March because all of your financial assumptions did not come to fruition. So it was an enormous undertaking by my staff, the budget office, but also all of our colleagues in the departments who we work incredibly close with in coming up with the administration's proposed budget. Next year is not going to be like any other year. It will require very careful monitoring by staff and the city council to ensure that our assumptions are accurate. And where we are inaccurate, we're going to need to pivot quickly to make adjustments, whether those are to the good or to the bad. And certainly right now, we're budgeting based upon mainstream economic assumptions. So a lot of forecasters are out there now saying that this recovery may take a little bit longer than what they had originally thought back in March, more of an L-shaped or a U-shaped recovery. But we do still have many forecasters thinking that that the bounce back, while the depth of this recession are pretty steep, that the bounce back could be relatively sudden as well. So there's absolutely a lot of uncertainty. And really for the first time, we actually embedded into our analysis a pessimistic scenario for forecasting revenues in our general purpose fund. And under that pessimistic scenario, we did show to council and to the administration that revenues in the general purpose fund could be as much as $25 million less than what we are actually budgeting to. And actually, as we get closer to budget adoption date, it's been more difficult for staff to really refer to that as a pessimistic scenario, because at this point, almost any revenue scenario could really be our reality. So again, unlike past years, this will certainly require much closer monitoring, ongoing monitoring of how revenues are coming in on a month-by-month basis across a variety of taxes. And so we really do need to be prepared for whatever reality we are facing. That said, the administration's proposed budget is balanced largely by pulling many of the financial levers that we had, some of which go against our financial practices, financial best practices, but that are necessary given the significant challenges that we face in terms of providing services to our community. A couple of those levers that we're pulling, big picture items, are suspending our contribution to our retiree medical trust fund. We're temporarily delaying some repayments of our negative funds. We're using 100% of our available balance in the city's rainy day fund. And we're also using one-time revenues for ongoing costs. All of these strategies that we're employing have inherent risks to them. And certainly if the contraction is short-lived, the city might be able to emerge rather quickly in good shape. But if there is a prolonged contraction, many of our one-time balancing solutions that we're using, such as using our reserves, will not be available beyond fiscal year 2020 and 2021. Important to note that the city administrator's budget really applies cuts in a manner consistent with the goals and objectives that we set out at the beginning of this process, which were, one, to be financially transparent, to maintain financial accountability as much as possible, and wherever we were looking at reductions, to apply those cuts through an equity lens. And I can say that when we originally balanced this budget, many of the changes that the administration put forward were to restore some of the things that the departments had either offered up as a potential solution. For example, you see very few cuts in OPRYD, Parks and Rec Department, because we put a principle in equity and felt it was very important to continue to serve our communities that rely upon those services. But even with all of the balancing actions that we took, our budget does still require roughly a $10.5 million contribution from the city's various labor partners, and that is to be negotiated. The largest departments taking reductions right now in dollar-wise, not necessarily percentage of their overall budget, are really OPD, but also in some of our administrative capacities, in the finance department and in the city administrator's office. Despite all these risks, it's not all bad. There is a mixture of some good news in here, and we are able to make some key investments. One of those areas is in park maintenance, thanks in part to the new Measure Q Parks ballot measure that brings in about $23 million. Which the majority of which will go to fund enhanced park maintenance, but it also comes with some homelessness money. And this is really great news because of the immense need that we have to serve our homeless residents, but also because it gives us, for the first time, some ongoing, regularly recurring revenues to address the homeless crisis. We also have new money in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, due to ongoing impact fee revenues, both our jobs housing and our affordable housing impact fees, and also an uptick in our boomerang funds. And we're continuing to expand our ability in the area of illegal dumping by adding one new crew in fiscal year 2021. One other bit of good news is the likelihood of state sharing of the CARES Act stimulus funding. If you may have read, the federal government adopted the CARES Act, which provided allocations to governments with populations of 500,000 or more. We fell just under that threshold with our 430 or so thousand population, but it seems likely that the state is now going to approve reallocating some of their funds to cities of certain size, including the city of Oakland, which would certainly help us to respond to our COVID needs, and those could be used for a variety of interventions aimed at homelessness, renter assistance, small business grant funds, and a number of other projects that we are working with a team to develop recommendations for the council's consideration in short term. So all that to say, next steps in terms of the budget is we have a hearing tomorrow. The administration has submitted a errata number 2, which amends our original proposed budget to capture some new downward revenues that we were experiencing. And from there, we know that we certainly have another meeting on June 30. We are going to work with the council members to see if we could get another special budget meeting in the interim. But I do think that at this point, we are moving forward. We are working diligently with a number of council members on their budget proposals and answering their questions. And look forward to continuing that forward progress. With that, I certainly turn it over to Alexa and Councilmember Taylor for questions.
Thank you, Adam. So does anybody have questions? We've asked Adam to stay and take a few questions. So if you have a question, please use the raise your hand feature and we can call on you. Or if that's not working for you, feel free to just unmute yourself and shout it out.
I know we don't have shy people here.
It probably means I talk too long.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Picking it up, but it'll be faster just to shout it out. If you could just give a kind of a ballpark estimate of what the budget shortfalls are being caused by. You mentioned the parking revenue and the sales tax, but yeah, by what magnitude do each of those contribute to the budget shortfall?
It's really spread out across a number of tax categories. It's not just those two in a vacuum. Some of it is certainly in sales tax. It's many millions of dollars. Parking taxes is the same. The Q3 report that is on the website that I listed does have a chart that shows you exactly what those revenue changes are. But in the aggregate, it's about a $55 million decline from what we had budgeted in our 2-year for fiscal year 2021. So it sums up very, you can see all the different line items. It touches just about every single assumption we made.
Thanks.
Thanks, Evelyn. I don't see hands up, but if anybody does have questions, please just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. All right, last chance. Any questions? Okay, if we don't have any questions, we might just let Adam go then. But thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate you making the time.
No problem. Thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. And certainly, if there's any questions, I'm happy to follow up with you all through email. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I think we're going to hand it back to our facilitators and Marissa and Jose and Micah to just head into a discussion with the working groups about everything that's been going on over the last 2 weeks since we last met. So Marissa?
Thanks, Alexa, and thanks everybody. I think with the budget conversation, what has been really exciting for me for this advisory council is that we have been trying to shift within economic and workforce development some of our programming towards reducing racial disparities. And I think we're also seeing opportunities like incoming CARES funding. And so having you all in the room is a really unique opportunity for us to get feedback as to whether we're putting money into the right things and taking the right actions. So we welcome your feedback on that. For the listening session for the working group, let me just do a quick check with Jose. Do you want to start with open forum or start with quick feedback from each working group?
I would say just to get the juices flowing from all of us, maybe do a very quick working group report outs. That might prompt some questions and conversation starters. So why don't we start with that?
Okay, thank you. I think the cross-sector working group was had some really powerful feedback for us as conveners. So I would like to start with that group. Not every group has a full presentation. Some of our work groups have actually just dove in straight into actions that they'll be updating on. But could we start with the cross-sector working group, please?
Sure. And Julina just let me know that she had to jump off temporarily, and could I please, kick things off for us? But I think in kicking things off, I'm mainly going to want to hand it over to the members of this group. We had a conversation on Friday that was both inspiring but also pretty jarring in terms of understanding the range of systems and structures that really have failed our Black residents and people of color more generally within the city, and people spoke very powerfully to that. And so that's part of why we wanted to tee up this conversation around the budget, because although we have talked about having race equity at the center of building a more equitable economy, I feel that this Recovery Council has been a forum for having some bigger picture conversations about how we make our investments at a high level at city, county, and state levels. So I guess I would just open it up to members of that group if there are parts of our conversation that they want to, bring to this this broader audience as we think about our collective work.
Does anyone from the cross-sector working group want to chime in?
Now, I don't put anybody on the spot, but you can just unmute yourselves and if you want to. We don't need to worry about the hand raising.
This is Stephen. I'll just say, Mike, I think you summed it up well. And I think the other thing is just that the exigency and urgency of this particular crisis, and the fact that we really don't want to fall guilty of slipping back into some of the same patterns that have happened before.
Okay, let's go then to phase one. Can we hear from the phase one working group?
I think that's me. We met initially and actually made some good headway on a variety of topics that were relevant, I think, to phase one and sort of moving into phase two. We were unable to meet. We were supposed to meet earlier today, but unfortunately, I think schedules got a little bit compressed. But I can say that the one outcome that I think is probably the most beneficial, hopefully, out of the gate is this acknowledgement that I think every small business and every business wants some type of, or needs some type of formal notification that the county is dictating. And as we know, the county obviously made some changes to their reopening plan as recently as Friday evening. So we've spent the better part of last week and the week before sort of coordinating with our bid partners and our chamber partners to create a poster that includes all of the requirements that the county is asking for. And thanks to Oaklandish for doing some beautiful artwork. We're going to be producing that probably in the next couple of days. It's actually done, but we're going to send it to the printer. The printer has graciously donated the printing charges for us as well. And then I think our first run is going to be about 3,000. And then we'll see how many people need them from there and what kind of runs we need to do subsequently. It was a bit of a moving target to make sure that the requirements that were dictated, sort of CDC, governor's office, local jurisdiction, local county, were all addressed. And we feel like we have a really comprehensive document that's been reviewed by a variety of people, including legal counsel, to make sure it's appropriate for posting for any organization. And we just, and I think we've already gotten some good feedback from our bid and chamber partners about how many they need. So we think we're going to be running through that first 3,000 run pretty quickly. And we'll be contacting people probably by the end of this week for drop off and delivery locations. We've also notified the city council and we'll be working with their offices as well to make sure that whatever areas we're missing through those sort of organizational structures, we'll make sure we hit through the council offices and through our other partners.
Thank you so much. And thanks for, I noticed that many of our working groups in our first session, we talked about uniform signage as something that the city needs across the city, and that we're able to that you moved so quickly on providing that, and that we can help distribute it and translate, and it's really excellent outcome. So thanks, Barb, and thanks, Angela, and other phase one work group members.
Thanks. I still think the JLID gets the best use of a mask with their logo. So thanks, you guys.
Any other comments or feedback from phase one work group?
I can jump in here, Andreas Kluver with Building Trades. I think that, as phase one starts to reopen and construction, we've been in this for quite some time now. about 6 weeks. I do think, and I'm going to call it more voluntary compliance, because I think it's very difficult to kind of have the city step in and dictate this. But if we are not in all complying with these safety protocols, then we are going to see a resurgence. I mean, it's starting to happen already, and hopefully it can be contained. And I think the problem that we have is we all want to reopen. We're all working hard towards that. We have to do it safely. But if we're doing it in a way that the numbers start going up, the county health officials are going to come back in and shut things down. And I really think, especially this new round of businesses that are starting to reopen, really have to take it very, very seriously. And you know, and this means both the businesses and the patrons have to do the necessary steps to be safe, so we don't see those numbers going up. I think it's just important. I know I drive around the city and I get very frustrated when I see a construction site where, you know, the folks, when you got 6, you know, folks hanging around a manhole without masks on it, I actually get out of my car and talk to the foreman and say, what's going on? Because we all have to do our part, or else these numbers are going to go up and we're going to be back to where we were. So
Thank you for that. And I think the city also has a role in helping to communicate that citywide. And we're also looking at using some of our Opportunity Zone related funds to help purchase and distribute PPE for local businesses. And I know that's a factor too. And we want to make sure that we're making it available to businesses that don't necessarily have the extra budget to purchase sanitizer and gloves and shields and all that. So having more information on what's needed and where is really critical at this time. Anyone else from phase 1 or questions related to this from anyone in the advisory council? Okay, I'm just checking quickly. Feel free to use the chat, and I'm going to keep checking for raised hands. Let's go to phase 2. And Brandon, were we able to get phase 2's PowerPoint in our slideshow?
Sorry, I believe it was up there. Let me double check.
Okay, then we should bring that up.
Or I can, is it Ari's slideshow, Marissa? I can just make her a host if that's easier.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just make you a host, Ari.
Give me 1 second and get this
Okay.
shared, right?
You should be able to share.
Okay, can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, so we are the phase 2 businesses and workers. So again, last time our priorities were a safe and successful reopening, both for employees and for customers, public space, so looking at interventions that we can make at the street level, discussing rent and eviction, fees and taxes. So we're just focusing on the top 2 right now because we think that they're the most pressing. And so even within those 2, I think, again, to the point that was just made, we're very concerned about safe and successful reopening. And so these are some of the priorities and principles that our sort of subgroup came up with. So the priority, of course, is like worker protection. How do we get PPE to folks that need it? Setting safe standard operating procedures, looking at ways that we can explore vacant space uses, and a buy local campaign. So it's sort of the more nuts and bolts side of making sure that everyone's kept safe, but then also boosting consumer confidence. And in some of the principles for action, we want to look through an equity lens because we know that's obviously important, that all of our approaches are culturally sensitive and relevant. And we want to make sure that we're doing what we can for businesses who are already struggling. So if it's possible to give PPE at super discounted prices or for free, that's definitely an interest. So within worker protections and PPE and standard operating procedures, for the ease of distribution, the priority is to create an online database and portal for businesses to get information. providing guidance on what the best standard operating procedures are. I know we've gotten some things from the county, but there's going to be some variance by different types of operators. So obviously restaurants have very different needs than retail or other services. And then we also want to look at groups that are developing guidance to minimize, doing people kind of falling under the trap of reinventing the wheel. So we want to highlight the best ideas and just sort of elevate those. The other point that was made is that we should utilize local companies for PPE, because we think that obviously, to the budget point, that's good for our local economy to be able to have people like Moxie or the Port Fabrication Lab be able to produce our PPE and generate those dollars locally. And then also using 211 and 311 to get our information out broadly. So within the other side of things, so the Buy Local campaign, trying to boost consumer confidence, we want to utilize sort of a virtual site. So if you think, mall map that tells you what's open right now and what's available, and products and services by industry type, that would be something very useful. So we can help to uplift our businesses that are local and small and operating sustainably. And then we also want to utilize local entities to create and set up Buy Local campaigns. So whether it's from the Oakland Indie Alliance, Women's Social Entrepreneurship Center, Black Cultural Zone, we also want to work obviously in tandem with Visit Oakland now that they've transitioned a good portion of their marketing to California. And so I think it's going to be, within the Buy Local campaign, it's going to be pulling together a lot of the energy that I think is already here in Oakland and just sort of centralizing our message. And then in vacant space opportunities, one possibility is looking at easing zoning restrictions and costs, helping businesses share space to control costs. So what that looks like for public right-of-way is still kind of a question. And then finding creative ways to encourage foot traffic to support businesses. This one's a little tricky because obviously you want people to come out, but not too many. So I think that'll be, obviously a challenge. Now moving on to our second priority is public space. So we want to make sure the implementation of public street uses will be simple. So the way that we're thinking, or the things that we're prioritizing, is removing government hurdles. So as we kind of all have talked about, the legislative package will come through council June 30th to adjust the municipal code. So, in the mayor's office words, like getting out of the way. And then ABC has also updated their requirements for what it looks like to operate outdoors. The other part of implementation is identifying partners who can fabricate some of the street furniture needs. And again, that might be Moxie or say the Port Fabrication Lab. And then the other part of making it easy to implement is creating design guides that are drafted and kind of easy for people to use, thinking more like a menu of options. So again, this is just sort of how we're thinking about it, like a pipeline for implementation. So clearing city restrictions, creating easy to use design guides so people aren't having to hire an architect, aren't having to, invent it themselves, creating, those connections to local fabricators, and then marketing the street openings. So the things that we're also still concerned with in public space is how to balance the desire for food trucks on public streets with brick and mortars. So, our thought was that potentially priority should go to the brick and mortar shops, given that, they're there 365 days a year. But we also want to make sure that we're offering space for food trucks because we think that's a part of equitable reopening. And the other concern, of course, is paying for street furniture. That's an additional expense, of course, for small businesses who are already struggling. So we invited ArcSign, who's a local architecture firm, to help us in this process. So what they've started to come up with are some sort of initial street schemes with dimensions so that people can kind of choose which option size fits for their needs. So here you see an extra small intervention on the left and then a larger intervention on the right. So what it would look like if your street is too small to maybe hold tables and chairs, and then on the right is if you were able to have potentially a parklet. And then there's also some thought going into how we utilize outdoor spaces. So, just a plan of how we keep people in sort of separated pods and what it looks like to use that as a space for activation. So anything I missed, group 2? Let me stop sharing. Anything else we want to add in?
I have a question, Ari, and thank you for being so clear. When you talk about zoning restrictions and getting the city out of the way, are there specific things that I should be focusing on in my communications with staff and other departments?
No, I think when we say that, sorry, that might have been the wrong use of words. I just mean that, reducing the minor encroachment permit requirement down to an obstruction permit, or, having cafe seating as, by right for restaurants. So those sort of municipal code changes that need to happen.
Yeah, and thanks, Ari. This is Alexa. Again, thank you so much for that presentation and all the work moving this forward. I do want to add that it's on the agenda later, but the city's calling that sort of the streamlining of the permitting process to enable public use of right-of-way, sidewalks, and parking lanes that Ari referenced. So we're calling that the Flex Streets Initiative, and Ari mentioned in her presentation that it was the legislative package was being prepared for council on June 30th, but given the revised county order that's actually allowing outdoor dining this Friday, which is Friday, June 19th, we're actually working with the city administrator's office to expedite that approval process so that hopefully we can be ready to start allowing the streamlining process to align with the reopening on the 19th.
Oh, that's such good news, because just this morning, OIA had a member meeting and everyone was like, what are we going to do in those 11 days? So that's excellent.
Yes, so we should, thank you. Yeah, we should. I want to thank the team for working on that. So yeah, we should have more details on that very soon. But yes, the plan is to have it align with the reopening.
Yes, never say government can't act quickly.
Was one of the other zoning issues that came up in an earlier recommendation, and maybe even have been from a different group, about allowing businesses who couldn't use their space for what it was zoned for to pivot and use it for another use? Is that still something we want to follow up on? And what the process is for doing that, besides getting us another $56 zoning clearance?
That's something that came out actually in one of the first meetings in working group 3, phase 3. I know that was discussed by some of our business owner members that said that, just relaxing, the city relaxing its policies around the use of space. So I don't know if it was discussed in phase 2, but it came up in phase 3.
Are there any thoughts or specific examples of that from the advisory council? What you might want to do or see happen?
And I want to point out that we do have Bill Gilchrist, our Director of Building and Planning, on the call today too. So
this was brought up by Josh from Ibalsi about using also, and probably in addition to the other folks who have brought it up, about using what space was designated as retail for other uses. I don't know if that's exactly what you're referring to, Jose, but their hands were tied in leasing to, say, a recording studio or something like that. That's not the typical retail space.
The specific proposal was to give a sort of a 1-year period where vacant ground floor space could have any use for up to 3 years, so that people could experiment with what is going to be the new normal for retail, what is the new normal for ground floor space. But rather than make it difficult to put new uses, to make it easier. Also, I see a comment on the chat about pop-up space. I think allowing sort of unpermitted pop-up space for a limited period of time, just so we can all experiment with, how do we make sure that Oakland doesn't become a city of vacant retail, of vacant ground floors.
Yeah. If I can, Josh, is Bill Gilchrist here. since Alexa has invoked me, I'm going to jump in the conversation. I mean, and I do appreciate what Marissa's saying, and you as well. But to the extent that we can get some sense of what the breadth of possibility is, that would really be helpful. Because I just want to say, I don't think the sole issue is going to be what we do from a regulatory perspective here. Zoning is also meant to protect folks who are joining you, or at least they perceive it as their protection. So to the extent that we can get a real good sense of what we're trying to socialize around the range of businesses that might pop up, it'd be very helpful for us to be able to know what we're walking into. And then also be good to have some sort of public information program to go with this as well. That as we are opening up the range of uses and possibilities, we're just able to let business districts and the business areas, retail areas, property owners aware that we're going to be exercising this kind of latitude.
Yep.
It might be as simple as allowing for office space that has public use, that has a quasi retail front. I mean, there's a lot of or light maker type spaces, and I understand there needs to be some limits on that to not affect the neighbors, but
Hey, Josh.
so we can put together a list.
Thank you. Lynn has her hand up as well. Lynn, let me see.
I just unmuted myself. I attended both the phase 2 and the cross-functional meetings, and I wanted to point out that something came up in both of those meetings, and that was groups working on some best practices, some ideas on how to open businesses, and some of that was around consistency, keeping people safe through consistency, that patrons to eating establishments wouldn't wonder what the rules were. It wouldn't be, one set of rules in one place, one set of rules in another place, but that maybe we could provide guidance by industry. That was mentioned in Ari's presentation, but I just wanted to point out it also came up in the cross-functional work group as well. And it seems like a lot of people are doing work on it right now, and we may be able to save people a lot of anxiety and a lot of people a lot of work if we push that sooner rather than later, because businesses are opening up right now in one way or another. And rather than having all these people do that work out there, to have a place to go where you could look, what is appropriate PPE for employees of that type of industry? What are the standards in terms of allowing people to come in, or how many people come in, or how you separate them, or how you keep the area open, or how you could use a sidewalk if you have access to the sidewalk, or whatever the details are, I think would save a lot of people a lot of time now.
Thank you. Yeah, we have industry guidelines on the economic workforce development's recovery page. Are you talking about getting those industry specific guidelines and getting those out to businesses that are wrestling through that right now?
Yes. So getting it out to, and then there are different types of, some of the one-on-one service industries are going to share a lot of commonalities, but that may be different than, other industries. Manufacturing is going to be different than retail, which would be different than personal service industries like hair cutting and nail salons and things like that. And to maybe get some of them out now, or to just let people know where they can find them, so that we don't have a confused population who are trying to use these services and maybe making mistakes, and that we don't have businesses who aren't connected into big groups like this, where they can hear, hey, people are developing this, that they know that this is out there for them.
Thank you, Lynn. Atticus from Moxie. Can you unmute yourself?
Hold on 1 second.
You got it.
It's not letting. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
Thanks. You know, to add to what Lynn was saying, I wanted to echo what Jessica Chen had spoke about in our meeting, which I think is very critical here. Aside from having like some type of portal online with access to some standardized signage and messaging and kind of SOPs around proper social distancing and things of that nature. You know, I think, and Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that she spoke about and I agree with is outreach and education to businesses and organizations about what these practices are. You know, we have a really diverse city. We have, you know, people from all types of cultural backgrounds. There are language barriers. There's all kinds of different barriers and hurdles we have to work with here in Oakland, right? You know, we're not really a monoculture. And with that, if we're going to standardize things, you know, education is the biggest thing. We see that in a lot of different things as we try to improve this city. So really having some time, you know, not like a regulatory agency about this, but more like an outreach and education that can help explain to businesses safe practices. And by the way, besides these safe practices, you can go to this portal and you can get this information, you know, and this information is available to you, you know, because some businesses, they stripe on the ground, some businesses they don't, some businesses have viral guards, some businesses don't, some businesses have signage that's easy to see, and common sense is not so common, you know, like people don't necessarily aren't putting signs in really visible places. And if they are putting signs up, you know, they're really tight, they're really small, and you got to kind of hunt and look for them, right? So in standardizing this and making our city safer moving forward and flattening the curve, I don't think, you know, I don't think it's about the second wave coming. I think it is here and it's rising, right? Especially with all the protests and the gatherings and things of that nature, right? That standardized practices need to be advocated for and shared. And if there's budget within the city to do that, I think that's a really critical one. So I think people are going to need hand-holding in the process.
Thanks, Atticus. I think that's a great point. And I think, you know, we're looking at, for example, CARES Act funding, and maybe we put in that as part of the budget, just, you know, distribution and communication and education as a funded partnership.
I got one more point too.
Yeah.
If it's okay. The other thing was about the Buy Local campaign. The idea of having some type of virtual site for the city of Oakland, you know, in this age of COVID-19, we have a lot of compartmentalization. So a lot of people don't know where to go, where they can eat, right? Where can they eat out? Where can I go to go? Like, where can I go to buy PPE? Where do I physically go, and how do I get there, right? So some type of virtual site for the city of Oakland that links to like potentially microsites to different neighborhoods, and each neighborhood has a microsite for the different business, you know, microsites for the different businesses in there. I think that's going to be very critical in us finding each other and connecting with each other, you know, and also remember, our population is going to be moving around. This is going to be happening as people are working from home, people shift neighborhoods. It's going to be some migrations. We're getting influx of some new people moving to different neighborhoods, right? People going hunting for what they need to get from the neighborhoods, you know, and you got to kind of plan things now, right? You know, where you're going, you know, there's a little more, it's a little more methodical in how we move. Like moving impulsively as we're used to is very difficult. And so having visibility to a virtual site, and I think it's critical for Oakland. And I think if anything, it just help us. It also help people who are coming to Oakland who don't know Oakland, right? And as all that kind of stuff. So we can all find each other.
You saying a physical site or virtual?
Yeah, basically like a website, but I mean, a website, but not quite like the city website. Something with a little more, a little higher level of UX and UI, right? Not a database site, but a site that really kind of, you know, whether it's a child, whether it's a stranger, they could get on the site and very easily move around the site to understand the neighborhoods, right? Like, you know, like I almost hear Mr. Rogers in my head, the people in my neighborhood, right? So like a site that's really easy to move around, you know, it's got, that is very intuitive, you know, and there's a lot of there are organizations I think locally we can work with to build a really good site, you know.
Okay.
But I think that's going to be, I think that's going to be critical for us to find each other. I think we're going to have to find each other online, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just wanted to touch upon that second issue, just so I could advocate for that issue, because I think it's really important. You know, even my wife and I, like, we're having a baby that's due any day now, and we're like, sometimes we're scrambling around. It's like, where can we go eat? Where can we go get food? Right.
Right.
You know, I don't know exactly. I could look at a Yelp, but that really doesn't help me, you know, as much as it would be to have an Oakland site. So,
I think, yeah, Ari put want something in the works in the chat, and I think this is a really great recommendation. I'm gonna put it, I'm gonna create a Google Doc for us that we'll be working on through the next meeting, and I would love to continue to have your input on shaping this and what it could look like.
I'd love to have some input on it. We've worked with a lot of data visualization projects and art projects, especially with Gray Area Arts Foundation in San Francisco. That is one of the prime places for data visualization, because it's not just lights anymore. It's beyond that. But okay, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. That's exciting. Anything else from phase 2 before we hear from phase 3? Thank you so much, Ari and Atticus.
I just wanted to reiterate that doing the best practices is really important. I know that we started to put together, you know, our own internal document of best practices at all 3 of my restaurants that we're going to be using, and we're in the process of translating it. And it's you know, it's really nerve-wracking right now, because as you know, Friday comes, like, we want to make sure that we're doing everything properly. I don't know if what I've put together is right. I'm just kind of pulling from, you know, where I can, and it'd be really, you know, great to have people from each industry provide that information, because we know the industry the best. And I think, you know, utilizing, you know, what it doesn't have to be what I put together, but, you know, people like me that put this stuff together, you know, from each industry, and then, you know, putting that, you know, as, you know, across the board use throughout that industry is of great importance, because the last thing that I want to see is a guest come in to my restaurant and have to act differently than going to another restaurant and acting differently, just like going to a retail store or anything like that, because that's going to create confusion and stress in our staff and in our guests, and it's really not going to get us moving forward the way that we want to.
Thanks, Chris. I'm definitely hearing that we need to get that uniform communication across the city and focus on that as a priority. And thanks, Barb, for posting that additional site in the chat that the chamber has for, I guess, for business to business exchange. Is that right, Barb?
Well, the goal was actually to do just this, which was to create a landing location for a variety of information that anybody could access at any time. So it would be not one organization's, but just the culmination of all the efforts that anybody could use. And it just has to sort of host or sit somewhere. And we just thought My Oakland was very inclusive and sort of representing what everybody, I think, was thinking about. At least that's what we were hoping.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Phase 3 work group. Could we hear from? I think the primary thing you've been working on is the rent convening. Do you want to give an update on that, Jose?
Yeah, that's been the one has the most energy in our group. Strikes me as I was listening to this conversation about phase 2. You know, the rent relief and mortgage relief conversation that we're setting up, and Michael Bush, who's part of our group and who you all heard of from the keynote, is helping lead this effort. That one of the things that strikes me is that we, you know, as we get creative around use of space, we got to ensure first that that business still is there. So the first thing is, from the city side, there's energy around extending the eviction protection extension. So how do we continue that? But from the rent relief and mortgage relief discussion, the way we're going to approach it is in two steps. And I talked to Michael this afternoon. First, we're going to do a deeper dive listening session with business owners. And I know some of you have reached out that you want to participate, so I have you. But one of the things that I would do is, after this call, if you are a business owner that wants to participate in that discussion, and what we want to gather is not only stories, but also facts about what's your experience going through right now. So we can identify trends and themes across the business owners of what you're experiencing. And then take that, gather that information, and then have a second meeting with just property owners, landlords alone, so that they can also provide their input on what they're doing. I've already talked to them, quite a few of them over the past 2 weeks. And it's a good sign that they want to come to the table and talk about what the opportunities are. So that's a good sign. And some of them are already sharing ideas of what they're doing. So we want to give them that safe space as well. And then reconvene with a meeting with coming together of the ideas. We thought that, if we pursued of just having business owners and property owners in one meeting and having that discussion, that we thought that it might not create that safe space for people to be candid and honest. So we want to do it in two steps. So the other part is that in those two meetings, we definitely want the city's participation. So Marissa and Brandon, you'll be invited to that. But the other people that are also part of it are people from the county, from Supervisor Carson office and also from the tax assessor Fong Law's office are going to be participating, just so we can also get the county's perspective on this as well. So that's really the effort that we're focusing on right now. We should be getting that invitation for the business owners by the end of this week, so we can set that up. So again, if I got some of you that send me names that are interested, and you can send it to the chat or send it to me directly, and just let me know, raise your hand that you're interested to participate in that business discussion first, and then we'll follow up with the property owners later.
Thanks, Jose.
This is Jennifer here with the Oakland Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce. I think underlining what Jose just said about making sure or ensuring that businesses are still here as part of the economic recovery plan is like another part of that is thinking about how do we help our businesses shave off unnecessary costs. And if I really wanted to bring in the progressive business tax reform that Councilmember Bass as well as Councilmember Tao and Dan Kalb are proposing at the moment. And we're talking about reopening, we're talking about right now rent and mortgage relief. And I think that this discussion around updating our business structure, small business structure, is going to be really important. I don't want to assume that we're all on the same page, but just definitely wanted to bring it up so that we can talk about what's going to be best for small businesses in terms of, like supporting or thinking about how can we really shape this policy to help small businesses during this time that are paying much more than other businesses in our neighboring cities. So just wanted to raise it. I don't know if folks, we've been told that the proposal or discussion around it has been floating around, but given that these are the key business leaders in Oakland, I'd love to hear what other folks' thoughts are.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
It's more coming less as a co-chair facilitator, but more from a participant. In listening to that last discussion too, when we were talking about flexible use of space, and I can't remember who said potentially allowing a more flexible use of retail, for example, office use. to be honest, that kind of raised the flag on me, because the last thing that we want is to change the use of space so that a landlord can actually kick someone out that may not be potentially paying rent, and then bring on someone like an office space type that can pay rent. And we want to discourage that. We want to discourage property owners from going for the highest MSUs because a maker or someone else can pay rent, and our small business owner, like a restaurant, may not be in a position, because they're struggling right now. So I just wanted to raise that as we think about the use in creative space. We definitely want to have those things in mind where we don't encourage or even unintentionally facilitate displacement by changing the ground floor retail to a different formula. So I just wanted to raise it because it just gave me anxiety when I heard that.
Jose?
Yeah.
One of the things that we were talking about with respect to sort of sharing space is trying to facilitate cooperation among the business owners. So if we can try to keep in mind opportunities where we're not displacing one to bring in another, but rather facilitating sharing and cooperation, that might be a lens through which we can look at this potential action to keep exactly what you're worried about from happening. So that it's a partnership among the business owners, as opposed to an opportunity for the leaseholder or the lease owner to move one out to bring in the other.
That's a great way of framing it, Darcel. Thank you. On the progressive tax, we were going to include that actually in our city updates. I'm not sure how much has been kind of released that we can start to digest. But thank you for bringing it up, Dr. Tran. Alexa, do you want to come back to that with city updates?
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for raising that. And I think you're right, Marissa. The reason we didn't have something tangible on the agenda yet is because I don't think there's been anything finalized that we could share out about at this point. But I think you're right. There was an announcement, a press release from Councilmember Bass's office I think maybe 10 days ago, just announcing that this is something that the city, that those council members are working on, and they're working together with the budget office to do the analysis to bring it forward. But yeah, as Marissa said, at this point, I don't have anything tangible to share for discussion, other than that it's being worked on.
I just brought it up because given that we're meeting every other week and they're moving pretty quickly on this, and thinking about, is this something that the different business community leaders on this call want to take on as an ad hoc issue, because it definitely transcends our work groups, just like Jose's discussion around rent relief and mortgage relief. This is something that scathes all of our lives and the concerns of residents right now. And just I don't think, I understand that we don't have all the information, but just to say, is this something we should be, floating around to support? And maybe if we're not in agreement, how can we better understand this together? And this is a time where we can actually shape this policy so that we're not just passive when it does come out, and say no, we're for it or we're against it, further dividing the business community in Oakland.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's absolutely right. And I think, to the extent that I think it is really critical and essential that the business voices are in that discussion as well. So I think, we should definitely talk about the best way to work that into the working groups. And I know some of you, I think, probably have been briefed or have had some discussions with the district offices. So you might be able to bring that back to your working groups. But I know that Councilmember Bass, at least, is interested in getting that feedback directly from the business community.
And Jen, we can talk offline, because I did actually have a conversation with the council member about it. And I think their goal was to get some of that information out by the end of last week. And I think that's obviously slipped a little bit just because there's so much going on. By definition, a progressive structure is hopefully going to provide some relief to our smaller businesses in all of our areas. So let's talk afterwards, and maybe there's something that the chambers can do as well as this group in terms
Yeah,
of providing.
Mhm.
And the one thing I did mention to her during that discussion was, and this is not that the authors had not already considered it, but just underscoring that, that for some businesses, regardless of size, this pandemic has hit them in different ways, and their recovery will be longer. So, we're big advocates, obviously, as we do this all the time, making sure that those voices are heard during the discussion, during the creation of the legislation, so that we're not, sort of the unintended consequences conversation, we're not harming businesses that are going to take longer to recover than others, and that we're very conscious of that. So happy to talk to you offline too.
Yeah, she met with the ethnic chambers as well, and just thinking about, everyone's in this very, very focused, tunnel vision on reopening, that we're, it's hard to not think about November, and the other issues that are looming over the future of our local economy right now, as well as, our concern for health still.
Yeah, and for us, and for us, you and I, and many others on the call, our constituencies are going to be impacted differently, and it's super important to understand that and figure out how to manage those expenses.
Thanks to both our chambers. I think what I could do is circle over to your boss's office and ask for something written up that I can then full advisory council. Our next meeting is actually not until a month from now, so we'll rely on email communication just to share that and get your input and see if people want to form a group around that, and help to shape that proposal. I want to hear from, thank you, Phase 3. I want to hear from the Phase 4 working group. Dr. Hitano, do you feel like you can lead us through our really fascinating conversation from earlier last week?
Sure. Is everybody seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So the Phase 4 work group, I just have the list of members of our work group here. I think that we've had some really fascinating conversations, and we've learned a lot about each other. We're sort of that large format where we bring lots and lots of people together to gather. So we have, Southwest Airlines, Oakland Art Murmur, Visit Oakland, Small Business, Arts and Culture, Unity Council, Spur, Alameda County Labor Council, Oak Stop, Private Industry Council, and the Oakland A's represented to have these really deep and meaningful conversations. So I think that our conversations have echoed a lot of what the other phases have talked about, in that one size doesn't fit all. And as we're listening to a lot of the recommendations and guidelines coming down, it feels very much like a one size fits all in these different phasings. Our businesses, are diverse in sizes, in models, customer and patron bases, space needs, and adaptability. And so those are some of the continuing issues that we've been discussing, that even though most of our businesses aim to gather large groups of people, they're still very, very different. Some are able to adapt and pivot towards new models and income streams, as some things are going online. There's online conferences these days and things like that. But there are also a lot of things that cannot be replicated in different ways. Also, some are able to renegotiate contracts and leases, and others are not. It's really, really just depending on each situation, which is what we've heard in other phases as well. So how do we get all Phase 4 sectors through the now, as well as the post-C19 future? That's the thing that we want to try to do in an equitable way as possible, and that's really the challenges that we're seeing. So, right now, all group gatherings are banned until Phase 4. But we are seeing that obviously, restaurants are opening and there are phased ways of bringing people together to do different types of activities. But most of our sector is not seeing the ability to be able to adapt based on what is allowed and recommended, but rather our entire industries and sectors are being forced to not be able to open and to employ our people and go forward. In Alameda County, there's still no non-essential travel. So, we can't even really advertise the great things that we might be doing as we reopen our restaurants and our businesses. The balance of cultural and economic activity. How are we making sure that groups are surviving to the next step? We have a huge cultural economy in Oakland. And those are some of the pieces that we need to ensure survive in order for us to be relevant in the Bay Area. So how can businesses raise revenue for the work that they're doing to help people through the crisis? There are a lot of opportunities, I think, to be able to pay workers and earn revenue for different businesses. A great example is the World Central Kitchen model, which is paying restaurants for meals and giving them notice as to how many meals they're going to be purchasing. That's helping people that need those meals, but we're also employing people to be able to create those meals. And then finding ways to lessen financial liabilities that have accrued and continue until value of like memberships and subscriptions for those who sell those types of who have a revenue model that works that way. Also, accrued expenses, those are being deferred right now, but that's going to come due. And so between the liabilities of the revenue we've already accrued but need to be able to give value, and the opposite, that's a really big challenge for us right now. So health and safety, we talked about for us with gathering groups of people, contact tracing is huge. A uniform understanding, I think that's similar to what everybody is talking about right now. Building on PPE distribution towards touchless transactions, that technology that may not be accessible to people because it's a significant investment financially. Immediate development of protocol. Yes?
So sorry to interrupt. It's we are down to our last few minutes of the meeting. I hate to
Okay,
break in,
I'll skip ahead to some of the actions really quick.
Thank you.
Okay, so business actions. We're seeing that really partnerships. I mean, just in our group meetings, we've been talking about ways that we might be able to share and collaborate. Shift towards hyper-local marketing and services, focusing on neighborhoods, keeping money in neighborhoods, and community efforts that we can formalize privately that can move more quickly than the city. For the city, audit existing real estate assets so we can do space sharing, identify parks and spaces that might be able to host large gatherings safely. And most importantly, I think close the digital divide, Wi-Fi for all. Not everybody can access that, and that's a big problem for our business models. And then for state, federal, and philanthropic advocacy, income for workers with prolonged unemployment, address the burden on reimbursing employers, guidance towards allowing people to get back to work more quickly and innovatively, and resources beyond PPP and EIDL. So those are some of the issues that we've been all working towards. And if any of my colleagues in my group have anything to elaborate on, I know we don't have very much time, but there it is.
Anyone else from phase 4 want to add? Thank you so much. I just want to say it's been amazing working with this group because phase 4 is not, we're not allowed to gather as people, and yet we need to so much. And it's just been amazing hearing the thinking about how we can continue to do that and still help our artists and performers generate revenue. Has been really exciting. So it's been a real privilege to be part of that group. Any other questions or comments from the working group before we go, working groups before we shift to city updates? Okay, I'm going to try to answer some of the questions in the chat and ask Lysandra Dial, our Workforce Development Director, to kick us off. We have a couple of updates from the city side as progress that we've made since our last meeting. So, Lysandra, are you with us?
I am here. Had to take myself off mute. So good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about the new partnership we have entered into with One Fair Wage. Saru has been on the last couple calls. I don't know if she's here today, and spoke about a potential partnership with the city of Oakland.
I'm here.
And we are, yay, hello. So we're excited. We are in the process of finalizing all the details, but we will be working with One Fair Wage around their community kitchen project. This partnership will allow us to, sorry, my other computer is beaming. It will allow us to partner with up to 10 restaurants and subsidize wages of up to like 40 job seekers. Some of you may be aware that the city received 3 workforce grants from the EDD, the Employment Development Department. One of those grants in particular, the National Dislocated Work Grant funds will pay for this project. One of the great things and really important for us and in line with the City of Oakland values of equity is that the restaurants that participate in this project must go through the equity toolkit that's been created by One Fair Wage, which really looks at hiring practices, training, and promotional practices. It also, there's also a requirement that the restaurants pay a minimum of $15 an hour. So we're still, and I'm going really quickly, so sorry, but we're finalizing the details. One Fair Wage is the entity that's really doing the recruitment for the restaurants. But if anyone has questions, I know I'm talking really fast in the interest of time, questions about the project or want to partner, be one of the restaurants, please contact me and then I will connect you with the appropriate person. I'll put my email in the chat if anyone's interested.
Thanks, Lysandra. Alexa?
Great, yeah, thank you, Lysandra. So, I mean, I think as Lysandra shared, we wanted to take this short portion of the agenda, I know we're running over time, just to share some of the programs that the city is advancing now, really in response to a lot of the feedback and the information we've gotten from all of you. So we want to make sure we make time in every agenda to share back with all of you how the discussions and the conversations you're all having is really informing our work. So I think Ari already mentioned, I won't spend too much time. The Flex Street Initiative with the revised county order that just came out last Friday that's going to allow outdoor dining for restaurants this Friday on June 19th. The city is looking to accelerate our Flex Streets program, and it looks like we have a pathway to do that through the city administrator's office. So the goal now is to announce the launch of the city's program to coincide with outdoor dining by this Friday, June 19th. So the first phase of the program will really be focused on flexible use of sidewalks and parking lanes and private parking spaces, so public right-of-way, in order to facilitate quick restaurants to quickly set up sidewalk cafes and outdoor dining spaces. And we know we've heard from a lot of some different neighborhoods and communities throughout Oakland that there might be different spaces available, that there are different spaces available when it comes to available right-of-way to use in this manner. So there are subgroups within the city working with other departments with Parks and Rec to look at other options to create this kind of flexible outdoor dining space. So we'll have more information on that as the program evolves. But so just keep an eye out for that. We should have an announcement later this week. And then the second phase of the Flex Street Initiative will be around actually looking at shutting down blocks or closing off street portions to allow for even more use of right-of-way and street space. But that's going to require some additional study by the city. And as part of that, we are really taking an equity lens too and looking with an equity focus at what kind of resources are available in different neighborhoods and communities around the city to ensure that we're providing or looking for opportunities for resources to support those communities as well. So stay tuned. there should be more coming out very soon this week. And I'm going to hand it back to Marissa to kind of wrap us up and talk about the next steps.
Sure. So I think I have been in an interesting position over the last few weeks to take some of your recommendations and also to look at for example, our CARES Act funding, external philanthropic funding, and also the city's commitment to anti-racism and to undoing structural racism. So I wanted to bring us back to our race and equity implementation guide that we use as a city as a methodology for undoing structural racism. And there's a slide about that, Alexa, if we can bring it up. So in the context of thinking about the recommendations, and I also want to just appreciate so much the working groups that have just dove right into actions. As we start to formulate recommendations, we had committed to leading with an equity frame and centering equity. And the way that we do that within the city is a process that staff have been training on since the Department of Race and Equity was established, which is to name the desired racial equity outcome for each recommendation. So when we talk about access to capital for businesses right now, or when we talk about distribution of PPE, we name the disparities that exist in access to capital or access to PPE, and say what our desired equitable outcome is. What is the gap, the racial gap that we want to close? And then once we've done that, we confirm if we've named the right desired outcome by talking with the people most impacted by that disparity and gather data to spell out the extent and the scale of the issue. So when we talk about right now, we're looking at where's their access to capital need in the recovery? Well, which businesses weren't able to access PPP or the injury loan, or which workers weren't able to access benefits? And how do we start to define where the racial disparities are in that and what the needs are to close that gap? So I wanted to put out that for our next meeting that we would not just look at I will put together a summary document with all of the recommendations. And yes, be happy to share this slide. And also I've linked to the full Race and Equity Implementation Guide on our Advisory Council webpage, where Darlene Flynn does a better job than I do of explaining what our process is. But as we start to refine our recommendations, that we name the racial disparity that we are trying to close with that recommendation. And that as part of refining it, we reach out to others to see, we think we can, more fairly distribute PPE by doing it this way. Is that the right way? Or and get confirmation. And that staff will help each advisory council group as you start to refine your recommendations to get confirmation of that data, and put just, this is how we, I guess, create accountability within staff around putting the needs of the Black community first and of other communities that are impacted by racial disparities in Oakland. So I wanted to propose that for the next working group, that that be part of our focus, and I'll send some follow-up guidance. And I think since we have a month until our next working group, we'll have a convening with the group leads and facilitators about how to move that forward. And can you go to the last slide, please, Alexa, which is just our next meeting is a month from now. And I think there are some things in the chat that maybe should be said out loud.
Marissa, this is Councilmember McElhaney. Thank you for the frame. I think part of what I'm putting in the chat is I'm not hearing a sense of urgency. everything that we've talked about in these first 3 sessions acknowledges that like I'm still like shaking from Michael Bush's presentation with the number of businesses below the line that are like drowning. And I'm just curious, like, what is it going to take for us to move with the sense of urgency, or what are the things that we can announce that are happening like right now that may be helpful? And even as I'm listening to the report out from the table, it's like, how do we retool our response that we're like lifting up recommendations in days, not weeks? And I'm just about to fall out of my chair when we say, okay, our next meeting is in a month. And I know that like every day somebody is closing their business. And they're giving up hope. They're losing hope. We're in our 3rd, going into 4th month of pandemic.
Yeah, I think we are still seeing efforts to invest take shape now, both on the public side in terms of CARES Act funding coming in, and on the philanthropic side in terms of more people from the private sector stepping up and saying, I'd like to invest in Black-owned businesses. And so I feel like the advisory council has already given at least staff some helpful information about how to shape up what, our conversation about what funding is needed. And I want to be, transparent with our advisors that those are conversations we're having, both with the public funding stream through some additional CARES Act funding that we might be getting from the state, and also through like private philanthropic conversations. So we have started to lift up the need for individual financial assistance directly to both workers and to businesses, specifically around the issues of rents. We are also interested, there was a great suggestion in the last meeting that we should have an equity permit program like modeled after the cannabis program, but available for other industries with the commensurate support and real estate support and incubation that
So
mirrors.
kind of in a ballpark, what do those numbers look like in terms of the financial need?
I'm still looking for more information on that. And I think what's really interesting is that a lot of the funding has been aimed at lower revenue businesses, and we have some larger businesses that also need financial support.
Yeah,
And
Councilmember McElhaney, this is Alexa. So I was gonna say, yeah, thank you for raising this. And I think to the numbers, we are looking for ways to put numbers to the asks. And I think one of the numbers we've been looking at is the unfunded pipeline of businesses in the Working Solutions Emergency Small Business Grant Program. So that program has been able to push out $1.5 million in $5,000 emergency grants, which was one of the things that we've heard from the outset is just what small businesses urgently need to survive. They need cash to cover operating expenses. So that has been a focus, and that is an area where we do have data and we do have a sense of the need around that pipeline. It's about 3.6 million just in unfunded pipeline businesses. So these are businesses that submitted applications and did not receive grants and that are just waiting to receive grants. We know that that's not the entire need. We know that if we were to reopen that application program, if Working Solutions reopened it, that they would receive more funding. So I think this is definitely an area, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that we are now almost 15 minutes over time.
I'm putting it in the chat. I'm happy to follow up with you guys.
But I was going to say, yes, I think you are absolutely correct on the urgency and on the need to put dollar amounts to these needs and to actively look for funding sources to address them.
All right, see, that's why I put it in the chat. Don't be fussing at me about us overtime. That was Marissa's fault.
No, I wanted this feedback, so I appreciate you speaking up and out. Thank you for bringing us to where we belong.
All right, y'all. Take care.
All right, should we wrap it up on that note? Just want to thank everyone for your time, for your ideas, for your input. And I know that even though we're not meeting again as an entire group for a month, there will be a lot of conversations and work happening in the interim. So looking forward to hearing about all of that. Mike and Marissa, you have any final words, or should we sign off?
Just that I, as you all might have gathered from the last few minutes, am really anxious to hear about the outstanding needs from different businesses, and especially Black-owned businesses, as well as Latinx, Native, Asian-owned businesses in Oakland, because we're called on to articulate that need and think and respond to it. So I appreciate the businesses that have spoken up and told me I didn't get enough funding through this avenue, or this funding doesn't meet my needs. And I appreciate all of you that are keeping us informed on what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and I guess I would just close by saying, when we say a month from now, we mean that's convening this entire group. There's a lot of work between now and a month from now to take the things that we're hearing, like what the council member just shared, and get them into action within the context of a very dynamic conversation around the city's budgeting. So this isn't our taking the next month off. It's really making sure that we're prepared for bringing this back to this entire group for deliberation. But a lot of work is happening in the immediate term. All right.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll share the today's presentation and link back to the council page, as well as, I think, Alexa, an update on the county reopening timeline.
Yes.
Got it. And thank you, Darcel. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.